Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, helping you to find jargon-free information before choosing a professional to help solve your problems and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stuart Andrew Alexander.
Hi and welcome everybody to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And on this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so pleased that we finally have family law attorney Barry C. Boykin of the Chicago Legal Clinic, and he's calling in, you'll never guess where, from Chicago, Illinois. Now, Barry, who is considered to be a leader in the area of family law, will be talking to you today about how to communicate with your ex, even if you don't live together. Now, that applies to many people. I know so many people who have split up. They don't live together and they don't communicate with each other. So I'm really excited to hear what Barry has to share with us. So if you are one of the many increasing numbers of people who have split up with their ex, and the communication could be better, then for you may just want to just down tools. Log out of Facebook, quit the Twittering and Instagramming or anything else you happen to be doing which may cause a distraction. And I'll give you a little insider's tip. Grab yourself a notepad and pen and get ready to take some notes as we listen in to what Barry has to share with us today. So with that said, let's not keep him waiting any longer. Welcome to the show, Barry.
Thank you, Stuart.
You are so welcome, my friend. Barry, before we jump in and really get into the heart of today's discussion, let's just do some housekeeping and make sure that everybody out there knows that from this point on, anything you share with us today is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of sharing general information. Now, would you just care to expand on that in your own words so everybody knows exactly what we're doing here today, Barry?
Yes, Stuart, that is important. And the information we talk about today shall not be considered formal legal advice. And so any of the listeners should know that providing the advice here, any information here does not create a lawyer-client relationship. And anyone with a legal question is encouraged to seek the help of a lawyer for specific advice regarding their individual legal need.
Thank you for sharing that, Barry. You've heard it yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. You know exactly what we are doing today. So with that said then, Barry, tell us a little bit about Chicago Legal Clinic and the people who you serve and the kinds of situations that they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
I do work for Chicago Legal Clinic, a wonderful group. I'm a staff attorney. And the benefit of the clinic, Chicago Legal Clinic, is we're community-based. So we have several offices in different communities in Chicago. And we serve low-income families in the area. We charge according to a sliding scale. So we're affordable. We charge less than what a private attorney may charge. So we're not-for-profit. And the result is that we work on promoting justice through greater access to the legal system. So to put it very, very simply, we help a person get their day in court and help them tell their story where it matters.
So, Barry, what are the advantages then of being able to communicate with your ex, even if you don't live together?
Now, Stuart, I imagine some of the listeners are saying right at the start, wait a minute, you don't know my ex. We can't talk about anything. We haven't talked for 2 years, even longer. Now, to that person, I say, stay tuned. Don't touch that internet radio dial. I believe you'll find helpful hints in our message today. And so by listening to the program today, then the goal is for your listeners to learn how to have better communication for the well-being of their children. And that better communication, why it saves you, a listener, time and money.
So when you think about the people who you help then, Barry, what do you feel are some of the biggest myths out there when it comes to communicating with their ex, even if they don't live together?
Well, myth number one is the idea that every case is a win or lose. situation. And so I've got to win. And actually, the goal in many cases, and not just family law cases, but in many cases, the idea would be, how can we come up with a win-win scenario where both sides are walking away with the benefit? And in the family law area, particularly, there's a myth that a parent has the belief they have to show the other parent to be unfit. And there's that competition that goes on. Anything you can do, I can do better. Some parents are afraid they will lose their kids. Now, one of the second greatest myths is that if I make approach to the other side for settlement, some will mistake kindness for weakness. And if I put some words out there, my words will be used against me. And certainly that's wise for a criminal case. Don't say anything, your words can be used against you. But in a family law case, parents have to talk to each other about their kids. The children are waiting, really, for the parents to communicate in a positive manner and are looking to them as a model and example of how to have a happy and healthy family.
Okay, Barry, thanks for sharing that with us. So again, when you're thinking about those people who you help on a day-to-day basis, what are one or two common misconceptions around the legal industry?
And Stuart, I'm going to tell you something I know you've heard before. I've heard other lawyers have been on your show, but my answer may surprise you. And that is that many clients come in with the idea that courtroom battle is like the reality-based show they see on TV. Now, here in Chicago, we often get the show Judge Mathis or Judge Faith Jenkins, two great shows. Now, here's the surprise. Sometimes what happens on TV is exactly right. So I've had colleagues who've said, oh, it's not like it's on TV. Well, sometimes it is. So on these shows, the judge will say, for example, let me see your paperwork. And the idea is that if you have something in court, keep good records. And again, this is going along with our idea of good communication. You want to communicate, parents, with each other. When you come to court, you want to communicate to the judge. And also, some coming to the court for the first time have a common misconception that the judge will have read the file or remembers the case from day to day. But like on TV sometimes, the judge may not know or appears not to know until you step up in front. What's your case about? And especially in First District in Chicago, Illinois, many of the judges have hundreds of cases. I know in one courtroom, a judge has mentioned having as many as 1,200 cases. Now, a judge will sometimes take notes and have a rough idea about your case and try to carry those notes from date to date. But sometimes when the judge remembers a case, it's not always a good thing. It's because people have gotten into a temper tantrum in the courtroom. And the judge says, oh, it's this case again.
Right.
These two people who don't get along.
So when your clients, the ones who live separately and they're having those challenges communicating with each other, what are some of their most common fears about taking that step towards communicating with each other?
Well, often a client will tell me that it's a problem of the other side. No one wants to take the first step, let's say. So a client would tell me that they're afraid that they'll be abused emotionally or some other way if they open up. And so they close it off. And they go long periods of time in peace, but without talking to the other parent. And so a byproduct of this is sometimes they'll use their children, even sometimes very young children, as the messenger, as a go-between. They'll tell little Johnny, oh, tell your dad I'll be late picking you up. Or tell your mom that I can't pick you up this weekend. And so they make arrangements with their kids, and the kids are kind of stuck in the middle in a place where they don't want to be. And so that's why it's so vitally important for a parent to find some kind of way to talk directly to each other about their kids and put on a united front that kids, we're going to work this out for you. We both love you. We both want to take care of you.
Barry, the reason for me actually doing this particular series, Let's Talk Divorce, is based on what you just shared with us. So there's those children who get caught in the middle of these conflicts between adults. I like to call them the invisible voices, because I was a child of divorce and experienced a very violent, a very volatile. There was lots of blood, lots of shouting, lots of fighting, and I was caught in the middle of that as an 8-9-year-old child, and obviously didn't have the resources, didn't have the capacity at that young age to be able to deal with that. So I carried the guilt of my parents' breakup throughout my childhood and my teenage years, my 20s, 30s, and it wasn't until my late 40s that I actually started to be able to do something about that, speak with specialists like yourself and psychologists, etc., and to, just develop the resources to deal with the psychological fallout of my parents' breakup. And one of the things that I found extremely difficult to deal with is this whole ping pong game of being in the middle, and your mother saying this about your father, and your father saying something about your mother, and like you mentioned, you tell your father this and tell your mother that, and then they were fighting, and your mother's like this and your father's useless, and it just had a huge negative impact on me. And fortunately, I'm in a position today where I can deal with that, I can cope with it. But I've created this show for that very reason, so that when experts like you come onto the show and speak with those people, those separated couples who are having these communication issues, that they hopefully listen to what you say and put the children first, those invisible voices. I always like to say, love your children more than you hate each other at this particular time in your lives. They have to come first. You have no choice but to be amicable, at least in front of the children, because they pick up on every single nuance. I can tell you that from my own experience. I'm a grown man now, but I remember everything, every single nuance from my childhood. So I'm so glad that you brought up that point, and that you've come onto the show today just to speak to people who may find themselves in it's such an unfortunate position where you have broken up, or you're considering your options for divorce. However, the children must come first. So thank you for sharing that with us, Barry. I really appreciate that.
And Stuart, you've hit the nail right on the head. And in fact, a judge who's now retired from the bench then wrote an article about a concept called heroic parenting. The judge's name is Michelle Lawrence. Michelle is Michele, and Lawrence is Lowrance. And so your listeners, if they do a Google search, they might come across the article. But basically, it's the idea is that let's love the kids more than we hate our ex, and let's do what we have to do so that the children feel safe and healthy and happy, and that they have no concern that each parent loves them. That they got to know that each parent loves them entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so important for every child to know that, because as a child, you love your parents equally. There's no bias there, and that's all you want in return. And I'm speaking to you right now as a grown man. I'm 55, going on 56 years old right now. But, if you would want to avoid your children speaking as I am doing right now as a grown man later on in their years, if you like to avoid that, then please do take the amicable approach. Put those kids first. Love them more than you hate yourselves. So let me just move on to our next question then, Barry. What other perceived obstacles do you see out there that might be preventing people in divorce from seeking the help of a family law attorney?
Well, the number one that we see from our office is the money. And so a person will often have gone to shop for a lawyer, and this person may be the first time they've ever talked to a lawyer at all. And they get quoted a fee, and they say, I can't pay that even if I mortgage the house. I don't have that money. And so that's why our group is able to come alongside and have a sliding scale. And there are attorneys also that donate their service. It's called pro bono publico, pro bono. Pro bono is a Latin term meaning for good, for the public good. And so some lawyers will donate their time, and out of every 10 lawyers who are approached to do pro bono work, I believe I've read that 6 to 7 lawyers will take one on. And so there are many lawyers in Chicago. If someone has absolutely no money, then they should keep trying and keep calling, because there are many lawyers out there, and you want to have a lawyer if your case is really in high conflict.
So one of our goals in doing the show, Barry, is to break down the industry jargon and really just make it simple for our listeners to understand everything what our experts share on the show. Now, you mentioned something called a sliding scale. Would you just briefly explain that in layman's terms so that everybody will understand what you mean by that?
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. And so market rates for legal services in our area, in Chicago, Illinois, then quite often there's a starting place of $250 an hour, $250 an hour, $300 an hour. And many lawyers still operate according to what's called the hourly billing. And so they'll quote a certain number of hours. And let's say, keep it simple, 10 hours. So 10 hours just to start the case. The client then has to have $2,500 in their pocket to get to the lawyer just to get started. And that's apart from court costs. And so a sliding scale means that we look at the government's scale of what's called poverty level. And so if someone's getting public benefits, or they're just above a level where they're getting public benefits, they're making minimum wage, $8 an hour, $10 an hour, and they don't have any extra money. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Then in that case, we look at their income, we look at their family size, and we reduce the rate. So instead of paying $250 an hour, they're paying $80 an hour, perhaps 1/3 of what the market rate would be.
Fantastic. Thanks for explaining that, Barry. It's always good just to break down any kind of industry jargon so that everybody is clear about what is being said. Now, can you share an example then, Barry? And obviously, keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, but please share an example of how you've helped somebody or even a couple that have split up and they weren't communicating with each other, how you've helped them to succeed with, to start that communication and to communicate more amicably with each other. Can you just share an example of how you've done that, please?
Yes. And first of all, when parents talk to each other, I've learned over the years how important it is for a person to tell their story in their own words and their own way. And part of the idea is let's do this in a way that's positive, that's friendly and polite, that's brief if we can. And so let me give you an example. So in one of my cases, all names are anonymous, my client sent an email to his ex. The email was about a special event involving their son, and my client was seeking agreement from the other parent in permission to take the child himself to this event, educational event. However, at the same time, the father was bitter about a piece of personal property from the divorce that his ex-wife had not given him. And so he makes the request. He says, please let me have our son for the weekend. But then later in the message, he says, when are you going to give me the item you stole from me that the court ordered you to turn over? So my advice was, hey, let's leave out the part about the personal item, a memorabilia, something from his family he was entitled to. But let's just keep it just to the one topic. Just, you want the weekend, ask for the weekend. And he saw the wisdom of that, finally, and he followed my advice, sent a politely worded request. Look, this is an important event. I'd like to take our son. The other parent agreed to the request. Now, they began to talk positively to each other, and so even better, on a later occasion, the other parent offered additional parent time to my client that my client hadn't even asked for. She says, look, I'll be out of town for a special trip going to a wedding. I'm going to take our son with me. How about you watch him for this extra time? So they began to work out their schedule of parent time on their own. So once you open the door, then there's all kind of possibilities of positive communication, of give and take, and each side has something to gain, and the children, at the end of it, come out the winner.
As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is family law attorney Barry Boykin, and he's here today talking about communicating with your ex even if you don't live together. Now, with that in mind, Barry, and for those people who are listening in right now, what are some of the unknown, or let's say common mistakes that they need to keep in mind no matter what kind of situation they find themselves in?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes is responding in kind when a hurtful statement is made. And so avoid name calling and avoid sarcasm. So the parents are adults. They're no longer in fifth grade. And so you remember that kids in school, at least in school where I grew up, the kids in the playground would say, I'm rubber and you're glue. It bounces off me and it sticks to you. And
so true.
And so parents, you keep in mind, let's keep it on the mature grown-up level. We're grown-ups. And don't the name calling back and forth. We don't need it. And then a second mistake is don't leave messages where the children might run across them. And so I had a case where the parents lived in different states, and their text messages became very rancorous, very bitter, very angry, name calling. And their little daughter wanted to play a game on their mom's phone, and she found the message. Mommy, what does this mean? And so they both were embarrassed. The judge found out about it, and the judge chewed them out and said, how dare you? And so don't leave messages where the children can find them if it turns out that you have left some nasty messages back and forth. Another tip I would say is don't be a bully, and don't let yourself get bullied. And so if you're sending text or email messages, and the other side is being unkind or rude, there's a delete button. Just hit delete. Don't have to answer back. That's the beauty of the communication that we can do now on media. Just erase it. If it was a letter, you'd crumple it up, throw it in the wastebasket. But it can also be used as an opportunity, though, to find out what's the other parent concerned about, and how can I address that concern in a positive manner. So if the mom is saying, hey, you deadbeat, when are you going to pay your child support, you so-and-so? Then he can say, oh, look, my paycheck was delayed. I did get your message, and I promise I'll get the payment to you by next week. And so use it as an opportunity to make it positive. Don't trade back and forth the barbs and the sarcasm, and but share information that the other parent should have.
Right. So, Barry, every family attorney I speak to, when I ask them how they got started, what inspired them, their answers have never been a straight line. Something along the line happened that inspired them to become what they are today. So there's always a winding path to their destiny. So my question to you then, Barry, is what inspired you to become a family law attorney? Please share a little bit about that story with us.
And Stuart, you are exactly right that I probably got the idea of becoming a lawyer from high school. And I was a pretty good writer in high school. I won what's called the Quill and Scroll Award, which was awarded to students at that time, and still probably is. And perhaps the teacher may have said that a legal career might be a good career for me. And my writing is generally better than my speaking in court, but I've learned to do both.
As you do. Mm-hmm.
And you generally have to do both to do well, and so I've learned both to speak on my feet and to write a good argument that's persuasive to the judge. I also saw examples of lawyers motivated to help those most in need. There was a group called Cabrini Green Legal Aid Clinic, and my first job was with a group called Austin Christian Law Center. And this was part of a church group that did a jobs program and an emergency shelter and a youth program, but also legal aid. And so even when I was in law school, I learned about the work they were doing, and I did some volunteering in my first year or two.
So Barry, can you share a lesson that you learned early on that still impacts how you do business today?
Yes, I told you about the one judge, Michelle Lorenz. There was another judge early in my career that the parents were not able to communicate well with each other and freezing each other out, not communicating. And they can't talk to each other. So, and face-to-face, in-person communication is hard. Phone communication is hard. So parents in conflict who are mad at each other, angry at each other, they need to find a way to change it up, to switch it up. And this judge, in a family law case, said there are many different means of communication. Now, back in that time, there was no email. There was no text message. But he said, you can send a letter. You can send a telegram. Send something certified mail. So there are many ways, many more ways now to communicate than had been. But the point was, let's begin talking. Let's begin talking about the important things, the problems, the concerns, because every family is going to have some problems and concerns. They're gonna worry. Do I have enough to support my kids? Are the kids getting to their appointments on time? How do I get them to school on time? And I have to work late. Who's going to watch them while I'm at work? And so parents working together then can overcome the obstacles that are in their way. And the children are observing the positive manner in which their parents are working it out.
Okay, Barry, you've been in the industry for quite some time, and you've helped a number of people to achieve that transformation they were looking for when they initially reached out to you for help. Now, when you think back on all of those cases, all those individual people, those families, those children that you've had an influence on, and you've been able to help them, what do you personally get from that, Barry? How does that make you feel?
Oh, I feel great. I feel as if I have made a difference, and in some instances even saved the well-being. In cases of domestic violence, in fact, it's a life-saving circumstance in some instances. And so it's a great reward, and I have had many clients who have complimented me and they've told me about their children. When the children grow up, I've seen them in the street, and they say, "Oh, you were my attorney, and my kid's now in college and doing great." And that's always wonderful to hear when parents are able to succeed and to improve their lives. And that's kind of the goal. How can we work together so that we're all living a better life?
So what's the most important question that those people who have separated and they're living in different households and they're considering communicating with each other, how do we do this? Well, what's the most important question they should be asking themselves?
Well, the first question I'd say would be, how can I be a hero to my children? And how can I make a healthy and happy home? And everything falls in place a bit when that's the priority. Not how do I get back at my ex? How do I pay them back for how she made me feel or how he made me feel? That's not the goal. So the goal is how can we still, even though our children have two homes, mom's house, dad's house, how can we make it so that they feel secure and that they've got a stable situation and that we're supporting them and that they feel connected both of us. So that's the most important thing. What am I doing to make my kids feel good?
Thanks for sharing that, Barry. So before we close out with our last question for today and find out how our listeners can get in touch with you, what's the most important thing people in divorce should consider when evaluating a family law attorney?
The important thing that should be considered, and this is true almost of any lawyer for any legal problem, is in the meeting, and there it's good to have a face-to-face meeting, then you want to find out, how does the lawyer listen? Bring your questions. How does the lawyer answer your questions? You want to get an idea, is this a good fit? Can I work with this person? And you definitely want to find out, how much is this going to cost? And how big a payday is it going to be at the end of the process?
So if somebody does feel that they want to know more about communicating with their ex, even if they're not living together, how can they find out more then, Barry? What's the easiest way for them to reach you?
We have a 9 to 5 intake for new cases, and they can do that by calling a number. That's 773-731-1762. And they can also reach out by email. My email address is bboykin@clclaw.org.
So thanks for sharing those contact details with us, Barry. So I was just thinking while you was sharing those details, maybe there's somebody out there that's been listening to the show and they think, yeah, Mr. Barry Boykin, he certainly sounds like he knows what he's talking about. He's got lots of great experience, and I'm sure he can help me, but I still have a little bit of reservations about picking up the phone. I've had one or two bad experiences before with family law attorneys. So in that case then, Barry, could you just briefly explain what would happen or what will happen when somebody actually dials your number? What's the process? Let's just eliminate any doubt that they're going to be hard sold to, hit over the head, dragged in the corner by the scruff of the neck, and beaten up by some salesperson. So please go ahead and explain what will happen.
The person will be answered by one of our intake workers, and so we have intake workers that get the calls that come in. We get perhaps at least 20 to 30 calls a week for new cases. And so there'll be a little bit of a screening that takes place. So they'll call and the intake worker will get some of their information. Now, this is important because we can't represent both sides and we have to screen for conflict. So sometimes, rarely, but sometimes we've given advice to the other party, the ex. So we can't represent both the ex and the person. And so we'd find that out early on and then give them a referral. So even if we can't help, we can send them to another agency similar where they may be able to find comparable legal services. And so the first call will be just to do a bit of a screening and find out, are we a good fit? And do we have an attorney that handles the kind of case that you need help with?
So, Barry, what do you think? Do you think you and I could sit here and continue talking for another 5-6 hours on this topic?
Oh, absolutely, Stuart.
Yeah. Man, I just feel that you're just starting to scrape the tip of the iceberg with the amount of insights that you could share with our listeners today. However, Barry, unfortunately, we are out of time. So let me just remind everybody that we have been listening today to family law attorney Barry C. Boykin of the Chicago Legal Clinic in Chicago, Illinois. So thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Barry. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client's success. So thank you.
Stuart, you're quite welcome, and I appreciate that you've had me on your wonderful show. And I look forward to talking to you again at some future time.
And I thank you so much, my friend. You have a wonderful day over there in Chicago. And I'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you. Yes, our listener. Without you, we wouldn't have anybody to speak to. We'd be sat here twiddling our thumbs. So thank you for joining us on this insightful and informative discussion with one of the leading family law attorneys in the Chicago, Illinois area today. Again, his name is Barry Boykin. Make sure you do check him out. Give him a call. Visit his website. There are some good resources on there. I'm sure that whatever you do decide to do after listening to Barry today, you are going to be in good hands. So that's it, folks. Again, my name is Stuart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.